Most people know the names Julius and Augustus Caesar, and the roles that these men played in the transition between Rome's so-called Republican period and the beginning of its imperial period. However, the collapse of the Roman Republic was a centuries-long process whereby the political and social norms of the state were gradually undermined by the injection of unfathomable wealth into the political class of the burgeoning Roman Empire. Who were these wealthy politicians that killed the Roman Republic? What were their motivations? Were their actions really reflections of a corrupted morality, or were they the natural consequences of a broken system? In this episode, we discuss the life and career of Gaius Marius, one of many men responsible for the death of the Roman Republic. From his first experiences as a young soldier in the Numantine Wars to his 7 consulships, join me, Matt Lupu, as we explore the fascinating life and times of Gaius Marius. Gaius Marius was born in Arpinum in 157 BCE. The circumstances of his birth and early life are obscure. Plutarch, one of our main ancient sources, tells us that his father was a laborer and that he came from little family wealth. However, modern scholars doubt this story. It is unlikely that a country rustic with no means had quite so many marriage and familiar connections with the local nobility of Arpinum, and no poor family could so easily launch 2 political careers for 2 young men, as Gaius and his brother Marcus both entered into public life at around the same time. While Gaius would have been wealthy, he was not of patrician stock. From the very beginning of Roman history, the Roman people divided themselves into 3 classes: the patricians, or the nobility, the equites, or knights, and lastly, the plebeians, or commoners. Patricians, as a rule, could trace their lineage back to the original senators chosen by Romulus at the dawn of Roman civilization. The equestrian, or equite class, was made up of wealthy landholders with family fortunes but no familial connection back to Romulus's Senate. Marius and his family were likely equestrians. Marius began his military career in the Numantine War. To understand the causes of this war, we must first take a detour into the geopolitics of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Rome wasn't always the predominant military and economic power in the region. In fact, in the century before the birth of Gaius Marius, the Roman Empire had already fought 2 wars with the former preeminent Mediterranean power, Carthage. Carthage was founded as a Phoenician trading colony in the 9th century BCE. At the time, the city-states of the northern Levantine coast that we now call Phoenicia controlled most of the trade in iron and tin between their sources in the western Mediterranean and the empires of Mesopotamia and Egypt. Phoenician trading colonies were little more than way stations to facilitate the epic sea voyages required to keep the metals flowing. The number of colonists rarely exceeded 1,000 or so. Carthage was different. When its mother city, Tyre, voluntarily submitted to the Persian Empire in 539 BCE, the population of Carthage swelled with refugees, prompting a demand for more territory around the city-state. In time, the Carthaginians would come to control a great swath of rich and fertile farmland on the North African coast. With this agricultural wealth, Carthage soon became the preeminent political, economic, and military power in the western Mediterranean. However, the Carthaginians had competition. Throughout the rest of the 6th century, the Greeks began to pick away at the Carthaginian trade monopoly, undercutting their prices, pirating their ships, and setting up rival colonies opposite the Carthaginian ones. Mostly, these colonies were located on the south coast of Italy and the north and eastern coasts of Sicily. The competition between the 2 great powers would turn violent on the island of Sicily. There, the Carthaginians would fight their first war against the Sicilian Greeks in 480 BCE, and they would continue to fight on and off for the next 200 years. The last of these Greco-Carthaginian wars would directly lead the young Roman Empire to fight against Carthage in a contest for the total domination of the Western Mediterranean. In 280 BCE, A group of Italian mercenaries, freshly unemployed from their role in the most recent series of Sicilian wars, attacked the city of Messina. They turned that city from a trade port to a pirate base, from which they could prey on the bustling trade that ran between Sicily and the toe of Italy. Eventually, the Greek city-state of Syracuse attempted to dislodge the pirates and successfully routed them in a pitched land battle. The surviving pirates appealed to both Carthage and Rome for aid. Carthage acted first, pressuring Syracuse to stop its attacks on the pirates in exchange for placing a Carthaginian garrison in Messina to better keep them under control. The Romans debated their offer from the pirates intently on the floor of the Senate. On the one hand, the Romans had never expressed much of an interest in the conflicts between the Carthaginians and the Greeks, nor did they want to come to the aid of the pirates. Worse yet, if the Romans got involved in this fight, they could find themselves in a war with Carthage if they didn't move carefully. But on the other hand, if the Romans took a foothold on Sicily, there was much opportunity for spoils of war, as Sicily was full of rich and splendid cities. There was also the opportunity for further economic development with command of both sides of the Straits of Messina. Ultimately, the Senate made the fateful decision to aid the pirates, and soon thereafter, the first of 3 Punic Wars began. These conflicts between Rome and Carthage would fundamentally transform Roman society. An imperfect analogy can be made between Rome's transformation at the end of the Punic Wars and the United States' transformation at the end of World War II. Not only was Carthage utterly destroyed, but Rome was left as the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. The destruction of Carthage was so complete that there are no Carthaginian sources to tell their side of the Punic Wars. This is where we now find Gaius Marius, in the immediate aftermath of the destruction of the once great empire. With the defeat of Carthage in the Second Punic War, the empire was forced to relinquish control of all of its overseas holdings in the Iberian Peninsula. The Romans quickly claimed the former Carthaginian territory in Spain for themselves, establishing 2 new provinces in the process. In response to Roman colonization, the native people of Spain rebelled. The Romans would spend the next century subduing their new landholdings. The Numantine War was the last of these so-called Celt-Iberian wars. We call them Celt-Iberian because of the Celtic people indigenous to the Iberian Peninsula, who were hoping to throw off their colonial yoke permanently. The leader of the Roman campaign to defeat the Celts once and for all was Scipio Aemilianus, otherwise known as Scipio Africanus, because of his exploits in the Third Punic War. The story goes that he was the first Roman over the walls of Carthage during the ultimate sack of the city. Because of his heroics, Scipio Aemilianus was elected consul, despite the fact that he was too young by Roman law to hold the office. He would hold the consulship a second time in his fight against Numantia, the last Celtic hilltop fort to resist the Romans in Spain. Scipio Aemilianus would play a vital role in the political careers of 2 soldiers under his charge, one Gaius Marius, and another Tiberius Gracchus. Tiberius and his brother Gaius are both responsible, at least in part, for killing the Roman Republic. But for now, let's read Plutarch's anecdote about the relationship between Scipio Aemilianus and the young Gaius Marius. And so, Marius was advanced by Scipio to many honors. And once, when the talk after dinner had to do with generals, and one of the men present, either because he really wished to know, or merely sought to please, asked Scipio where the Roman people would find any such chieftain and leader to follow him. Scipio, gently tapping Marius on the shoulder as he reclined next to him, said, "Here, perhaps." So gifted by nature were both men, the one in showing himself great while still a young man, and the other in discerning the end from the beginning. Indeed, as if Scipio had issued a divine prophecy, Marius would prove a worthy leader to follow him. Join me next time for part 2 of The Men Who Killed the Roman Republic, Gaius Marius. I'm Matt Lupu. Thanks for listening.